Freezing temperatures are an inevitable part of bike touring, but luckily something that can be planned for to maximize comfort and ensure safety. I recently went on an overnighter up into the mountains of San Diego with just such temperatures in the forecast, and I thought this would be the perfect opportunity to share what I normally think about when planning for trips like these. To be clear though, I generally avoid extreme weather, especially if it involves rain, snow, or wind. I've camped as low as 5 degrees Fahrenheit, which is about -15 Celsius, and while I believe much of what I'm going to talk about today does apply to more extreme weather, I greatly recommend practicing these skills in more moderate conditions, doing more research, and perhaps even learning some wilderness survival skills before venturing into the truly extreme. Anyways, my route plan was to ride about 60 miles and 5,000 feet elevation to one of my favorite campgrounds up in the Cuyamaca State Wilderness area. Temperatures along the route were forecasted between 40 and 60 degrees Fahrenheit, it's about 9 to 16 Celsius, and the overnight temperature was forecasted for about 30 degrees Fahrenheit, about -1 Celsius. So luckily, daytime temperature management was easy. Nonetheless, part of being ready for freezing temperatures is staying dry. Given there was no rain in the forecast, this really just meant managing sweat. No matter the temperature, wearing layers and moisture-wicking fabric is the key. In extreme cold, I wear up to 5 layers on my torso. My next to skin layer is always either wool base layer or an athletic shirt. Next is a high-end moisture wicking pullover, followed by an athletic full zip, a puffy jacket, and a waterproof shell. I apply this similarly to my lower body, hands, feet, and head. And with all this gear on, I would be comfortable at rest in temps well below freezing, but would be very unlikely to wear them all while pedaling. Even though all these layers, other than the waterproof shell, are moisture wicking, they can only handle so much perspiration and you can still end up wet. No matter how hard I'm pedaling, my goal is always to be a little bit cold so that I can avoid sweating in the first place. This often means shedding layers on uphills and then adding them back for the downhills. This can be extra tricky though in the rain because waterproof layers lock in sweat and are super warm to begin with. It kind of goes without saying, but staying hydrated and eating enough food also goes a long way in helping regulate body temp and overall comfort. I made it. I got about an hour and a half left of sunlight. Temperature's dropping. Time to get camp set up. Your tent is really your first line of defense against the cold. It'll protect you from the wind, and also your body temperature will increase the inside temperature of the tent. The next most important thing is your sleeping pad. I've got my inflatable one right here. I want you to think about the ground while camping, kind of like a tile floor. If you were to sleep on a bare tile floor, not only would you be really uncomfortable because how hard it is, but also it would suck all the heat right out of you and you would just be miserable. So your sleeping mat provides you both insulation and comfort. Next up is a sleeping bag. I know this is kind of obvious, but you really need all 3 things: the tent and the sleeping pad and the sleeping bag. And it's important to know that all of those things are rated for different temperatures. I have a 3 seasons tent, which is good for temperatures down to about freezing, maybe a little bit lower, depends on your comfort level. And then I have a sleeping pad that has an R value of around 5, I think. If it was gonna get much colder than tonight, I might consider using 2 sleeping pads. So what you can do is use a closed cell foam sleeping pad underneath your inflatable sleeping pad, and then you increase the R value without having to have too much additional equipment that's expensive. Same thing applies to sleeping bags. This is rated for 20 degrees. But you can add a liner into it and get you rated even lower. And then I use this even in summer, and instead of zipping it in the mummy form, I use it more like a quilt on a bed. Last up are clothes. Tonight for me, I have a base layer, some socks, a beanie, gloves that are somewhere, a second layer for the upper, and then a puffy jacket. And I think with all that, I should be comfortable enough outside while I cook dinner. And if it gets super cold, I can use varying levels of these layers inside my sleeping bag to add a little extra warmth. I'm gonna go get changed, freshen up, and come back for dinner. I've only been here about an hour. The temperature's already dropped about 15 degrees. I think we're expecting a low of about 32, so I'm pretty confident I have all the gear that I need. I always think though, when camping regardless, it's so nice to have a warm meal and hot cocoa or some other hot beverage. You know, I fully recognize that 32 degrees is not that cold for most places in the country. I'd say that's kind of by design. I think if you're uncomfortable with the cold, there's always ways to plan your route around having to be in the most extreme of temperatures. The first is just avoid winter, which is kind of good advice anyways, because days are really short and you end up just spending a lot of time in your tent. But there's other things you can do too. For example, part of the reason why it's so cold where I'm at is because I'm in the mountains. And so if you're on a tour, you could camp at lower elevations. So either go over the summit and go back down, or camp somewhere near the base of the mountain. And you'll generally find that you'll have higher temperatures at night. And then if you do end up in a situation where it's colder than you expected, or it's colder than you're prepared for, there are some things that you can do. So one is to run around, jog, do some jumping jacks, something like that to get your body temperature up before you get into your sleeping bag. And so then you just start out with a lot more temperature. Another is to boil some water and put it into a bottle that can hold boiling water and bring that into your sleeping bag with you. So excited for my nice warm meal and my hot chocolate. I'm gonna eat this, clean up, and get in the tent. Give you an update later as the temperature starts to drop even further. Good morning. It's about 6 a.m., maybe about an hour until sunrise. The tent got to about 32-ish degrees, about as cold as it's gonna get. I'm pretty toasty warm. Toes are a little cold, but that's more to do with not staying on top of my mat. And I'm just gonna hang out in here and read for a little bit while I wait for the sun to come out, warm things up outside. The temperatures are finally rising and I'm all packed up. I'm about to start my ride home, but if you enjoyed this video and you wanna see more like it, please consider subscribing and turning notifications on. And if you have any questions or comments or any ideas for future videos, let me know in the comments. Until next time, happy touring.